We had a great childhood with, when we'd go to Utah, it was the only place we wanted to go. We had 7 aunts and uncles up there and 32 cousins. And Grandpa's farm was just a wonder to us city kids.
So what was a wonder to you?
Oh, the cows, the chickens, the hogs. I used to feed the hogs. I just loved to feed the pigs because I had a way of doing it. First, I'd pour the pig food in the trough, and they'd all greedily come forward and start chomping up the food. Then I would pour the rest of it over their heads, and they would start to fight and bite each other to get that food. And I was enjoying this until one time my grandpa kicked me right in the seat of the pants and said, lift me about 6 feet off the ground. Says, that's no way to treat dumb animals. And he, of course, he was right.
Yeah.
But and I did repent of hog feeding to promote aggression toward one another. My cousins on my dad's side were different. They weren't members of the church, and they had no religious training whatsoever. And when the food was set before the table, it was just every man for himself, and no blessing or anything. I was talking to my Aunt Myrtle one time. That's my Uncle Les, my dad's oldest brother. I was criticizing how they were kind of brought up. She said, "Oh, Max, don't you dare criticize her. You don't know how poor they were. They just had nothing. They just had nothing. They came to California in an old beat-up car. My cousin Jeanette was just a child, and my Uncle Arnold, he was just a baby, and had a big collie dog named Tippy that sat in the front seat of this car. And they were constantly wiring my dad for money. We need $20. We broke down in Barstow, and they always had we just didn't, we would go over there on Sunday afternoon after church to Santa Ana. And Grandma would always cook up a bunch of chicken. Boy, she could fry chicken like you couldn't believe. And everybody smoked. My dad smoked cigars till he was 50 years old. And all my uncles and even all my aunts, they all smoked cigarettes, except my Aunt Nellie.
Really? I
Yeah,
didn't.
she never smoked. And we would sit in the front room and argue politics, and the air would be so jammed full of cigar and cigarette smoke that you could hardly breathe. And I'd go outside to get a breath, but I liked the conversation. I liked the talk of politics.
Well, that's obviously
really
carried over.
Really good. I have another thing. When I came back from the Air Force, I went to work with my dad in the dry cleaning business, and I hated it. And
That's good.
I hated it, and I decided I wanted to become a dentist. So I had to go back to school and get 12 hours of chemistry and 10 hours of biology, and 12 hours of physics. All heavyweight things for me.
What made you decide that you wanted to be a dentist?
I wanted to make money.
Money, the great motivator. Yeah, but there's a lot of ways to make money. So why
There are.
dentistry?
I had a good dentist as a child, and he was kind of nice to me, and I wrote him a letter when I got discharged from the Air Force. His work was so good that it was noticed by the dentist that checked me out.
Really?
Where did you get that dental work done? And oh, it just thrilled him to get a compliment. But anyway, I'd had this physics class, and I took it from this man named Julius Miller, and I'll never forget him. He was a very short, stocky, heavily Jewish-looking man with a great Aquilian nose, brown, flashing eyes that just sparkled with intelligence. He had been one of Einstein's students, and he just worshipped Einstein. And anyway, Julius, when he was just talking, he was just great. Like, he would come into the class, look at the floor, look at the ceiling, then look directly at the class and say, my colleagues say to me, Julius, do you believe? I took that to mean, do you believe in God? And I said, yes, I do believe. He said, what? A man of your intellect, a man of your intelligence believe in such myths and such fairy tales? He says, say, listen, someday I'm going to arm myself with musical apparatus, and I'm going to go down to the city hall, and I'm going to start playing my apparatus till I find a note that corresponds with the central I-beam of that building, and I'm going to bring that building down on the heads of those idiots that waste my money. But this time he's just out of his mind practically, and we're sitting there taking it all in. And then when he realizes how effective we're listening, then he becomes Julius the Ham, the actor, and loses the candidness of his remarks.
And this was what class?
Physics.
Physics.
Yeah. Basic physics.
I used to love it though when teachers would go off on tangents.
Oh, I did too. He ended up palling around with Admiral Rickover, the father of the atomic submarine. And he was complaining. He says, I can teach a third grader calculus, but they won't let me. And
That would be pretty amazing.
yes, and so they had a movie of him with third graders. See, today we're going to study Galileo. And all these kids, they remembered it.
Yeah.
And but I don't know what happened to him. He went to Australia, and I think he died over there. And, he was hated by his peers.
Strange. Tell us more about your grandpa, Grandpa Larson.
Grandpa Larson was a tall, good-looking man, about 6'4", weighed over 200 pounds, raw bone and muscle. It's just a big dark Dane.
So he was dark skinned?
Yes,
So that's where Grandma got...
He had black curly hair.
Oh, okay.
Half of my aunts and uncles, they had 8 children, and 4 of them had blonde hair, blue eyes. They all had blue eyes. And the other half had dark hair. And Grandpa, he was such a man of integrity, no education. Came to this country with his mother, who was a widow, and his family. And he worked on the railroad as a 12-year-old boy, driving a team of 3 horses and a scraper.
Wow.
And he got paid very little.
Yeah. 12.
But, 12 years old. He married my grandmother and started having a family. And he had a farm. He finally scraped enough money together to buy some farmland, a dry farm. He probably paid about $25 an acre for it, 200 acres. But then he started buying irrigated land. That's $1,000 an acre in those days. A lot of money.
Yeah.
And then he went in business. Not business, but into not a scheme, but it was a deal where the bishop had a contact with the railroad where they could use this land for 1 year. They had to clear it, plow it, harrow it, plant it. They lived out there on jackrabbits and canned milk and cheese all summer long.
Whoa.
And when they, this was 1911, and when they were getting ready to divide up the money, each man was going to get $4,000, an incredible amount of money. Well, the bishop, I don't even know his name, couldn't stand the temptation and took all the money, all of it, and went to Alaska. Left his family and everything. And my grandpa, very philosophical, said, well, I lost a few dollars, but he lost everything. He lost his good name.
Yeah.
And Mother said they darn near starved that year. And but they always had something to eat. But they never had any money. She would go to the store with eggs and trade eggs for butter and sugar and flour. And then Grandpa got the idea. He had brought a sack of coal. The men in his neighbors, they would go up into the canyon with their teams of horses and snake out of the canyon, the dead logs. And at Grandpa's back farm, he had a great back of his house in his farm, had a huge swing saw with a blade. It was over 32 inches in diameter, and no guard, no nothing. You just swing that thing through those logs, it would cut it just like butter, and then you'd get it into chunks that you could chop into kindling wood. Well, one time he would do anything to make a little extra money, because farmers got paid once a year. And he decided there had to be some other way to do something to make money. And so he brought a sack of coal. In the wintertime, it was so cold in Cache Valley, he would get up 3 times during the night. It had wood stoves, 4 wood stoves. Mother said she used to wake up and there would be frost on the top of the blankets.
Yeah.
Kind of curbed the wild desire to leap out of bed. And Grandpa would fill 3 times during the night, he would fill the stoves full of wood so that there would be warmth in the house. And when he brought a sack of coal from Ogden, and it lasted all night, he thought he had reached the ultimate in sophistication. And he decided to go into the coal business. And now he has cash flow. Then he decided to go into the dairy business. And one by one he would buy a cow here, a cow there, until he had about 15 milking cows. And he would get a milk check every month. And Mother said, we started having money for the first time. And when Grandpa died, his estate was around $400,000. And he used to boast, I've never paid a penny of interest to any man. If he didn't have the money, he didn't buy it. But he died when he was 72. He was, the day was never long enough for him. He just could work. Little grandma was the same way. I had 2 grandmothers, both of them 5'2", and 2 grandfathers, both 6'4", and here I was, a freshman in high school, just barely 5 foot, just barely 100 pounds, not exactly varsity material, and I thought I had been plagued with my grandmothers with dwarfism, and so I read books on it, and
Really, on how to get taller?
how to get taller, and there's one book on how you could stretch yourself. You know, we had at the dry cleaning plant, we had all these racks that would hang the clothes on. Well, I would hang on the racks for as much as 5 to 10 minutes trying to stretch myself. It didn't work. And I didn't start to grow till I was almost 17, when I was riding our horses. We had horses the last big old house that my dad bought, and my brother and I used to.
Was this in Los Angeles?
What?
Was this in Los Angeles?
Yes, it's right where Century Boulevard and the freeway cross, the 405 freeway.
Imagine horses. There.
We used to ride our horses to the beach. We had to cross 2 big streets.
To the beach.
amazing?
Wow.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Take the saddles off the horses and run them into the ocean. Oh, they loved it. And we loved it too.
Oh,
We'd
yeah.
jump off the back of the horse like a diving. Then we would ride home, shivering with cold all the way. We seemed to be immune to pain. But
How old were you when you did that?
I was 16, but it was we had the horses in a corral next to us. It was a whole acre, and my brother and I used to jump on the horses with no bridles, no saddles, no nothing, and ride them like Indians, and. We thought that was just great fun. Round and round the corral we'd go, and it was, an acre of land is fairly large. And one time we jumped on the horses, and they started bucking and kicking and biting each other and running wild, and we couldn't control them. My brother stepped off his horse, but I hesitated too long, and they got going too fast. And so I was hanging on to my horse with his ears, trying to guide that beast up to I was going to guide him up to the fence and hoping that his common sense would stop. Well, he was going full gallop, and I thought, this crazy horse is going to run right through that fence. When he stopped and reared on his hind legs and turned, and I went 20 miles an hour into the fence and broke my right arm.
Oh, that's when you broke your arm. Oh.
Yeah, and I went, first my head hurt, and I went to look at my head, and my hand was dangling over like that. Both bones were broken. And my brother called my dad, and he came and gathered me up, took me to the doctor's office, and he says, I've got a fluoroscope here, I can probably set it here. And he worked, and he worked. The ulna went in easy, but the radial was jagged, and he couldn't, the doctor, he worked and worked, he says, no, we're going to have to take him to the hospital and operate on it. My dad says, can I pull on that arm? And he says, well, sure. And he showed him what he wanted done, and my dad was super strong, and he just put that thing right in. He had to pull this part out and then slide it back.
And all this time, are you like screaming, or I mean?
No, they had given me a shot that seemed to deaden the pain somewhat, but I just grin and bear it, but bit the bullet, and set the arm, and I had to have it in a cast for 3 months. And when I took the cast off,
So with it shriveled.
it was shriveled and all that, but there was also 2-inch long, dark, curly hairs. You rub your hairs off by just rubbing your arms against your pants. If you did, it was really an amazing thing to me. But it was always Hiram, Utah, for Schneider kids, and we'd get on the top of Sardine Canyon, and we were still about 15 miles away, and my brother and sister and I are jumping around like Mexican jumping beans in the back seat, and Dad usually stopped the car and give us all a licking to make us behave. But we just thought that was just, it was just heaven. All those cousins.
Yeah.
Whew, it was really fun.
That's good. I'm gonna turn it off now so you can rest if you want
Yeah.
to.
I have nothing more to say.
No, I know that's not true. I'm just trying to give you a break.
Oh.